right, camera kick lighter here with Andy Selman. So thank you so much for doing this. Now I am a total beginner when it comes to anything halter related. So today you're gonna explain kind of the basics on how to get started and hopefully put it in very simple layman's terms for somebody like me. So yeah, kind of tell me what does this starting out look like?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to shed some light on it. So often people will watch halter classes and just not quite understand how that horse has learned to do that pose. And so I'm glad to have the chance to talk about it. And I think actually what I want to demonstrate is that the training of the halter horse is actually quite a bit like training of a performance horse. And it involves the same principles, or very similar principles, where we apply a cue. If that horse responds to that cue correctly, it gets reward. If it doesn't respond correctly, it gets a correction. And it's not, for my taste, a horse that does the halter stand up really well looks happy to do it. And so therefore he has to be treated real fairly in order to get that look. Right. So we want to, what I'd like to do today is just show a little bit of how we would start that process and instill the principles of the halter stand up so that that horse and handler can communicate well from the time they start until the time they compete. So I'm going to start with this horse. This horse doesn't show here in halter. She actually shows in Western. And I'm just going to pretend like it's the first time she ever got trained. So okay. The first thing I'm going to do is teach a cue to, the first thing I do is teach that horse to back up. So okay. That helps me that when I go to teach that horse to stop and position its feet properly, I've kind of instilled some brakes. And so I'm just going to show you how that happens here. Yeah. So I pick a place on my lead, not very far away from that horse.
I was going to say, you're pretty close up.
Dear hands-on gloves, Amber has been in our family for 33 years. As a pasture mare, shedding presents unique challenges for us, especially with Amber's age. Your gloves allowed us to spend some time making her feel pampered. They not only massaged her tired muscles and relaxed her, but they also bring out the best in our special girl. They removed the hair, dirt, and dander and brought out that gorgeous, glossy coat that gave her the name Amber all those years ago. Thank you, Hands-On Gloves, for making our old girl shine.
To begin, yeah, and then gradually as that horse and I learn to communicate, I can get a little further away from it. But first thing I want to do is establish contact on the back of that horse's head. So I'd like to have one line from my shoulder all the way to that horse's chin, rather than my body position being like this. My body position is really important. If I have some stature and my shoulders are back, my horse is going to respond the same.
Well,
so
that's similar to horseback riding. You know, when you think about holding on to a rein, you want that kind of direct line of connection.
Yeah. So to teach her to back, I always want to have a slight hold on her head. Now granted, I'm not holding her head hard here, but I don't want my lead droopy. To have a little light contact allows that horse and I to be in unison the whole time. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask her to back, and the cue I'm going to apply is just raising my hand with my microphone in it, and from there I'm going to step towards her and I want her to back. If she does that well, I'm going to take all that pressure away. If she doesn't do it well, I'll give her a little bump with my chain, but I'll try here. I take the pressure away and she stops, right? From there, I'll then have a cue that I can apply that asks her to stop or to back up. So then when I walk her forward now, if I apply that same cue to back, this will put the brakes on her and have her stop.
Okay.
So I'm going to demonstrate that once. Here again, my posture is important. The whole time I'm in front of her, I want to be careful with how I'm positioned. I'm going to ask her to walk forward. I raise that mic a little bit to tell her to stop. That's how I want her back feet, with her right hind foot ahead of the other one. You often see that halter pose, and this is a good foot position. Cameron, do you have any questions about that?
So I have a question about, I know that there is a very specific where you want their legs. And so you mentioned having that right foot forward. So is that just a matter of when you ask them to stop, Or is that something that you train them that they know where to put that foot?
It's a great question. The horse is not going to go on autopilot ever. Everything that it does, I want to have the ability to ask it to do that. I want to be able to position it. So the horse doesn't know that it's supposed to have its feet there. It just knows that I asked it to stop there, okay, and then I will be able to position its feet wherever I want.
Okay. And then I think that I know this, that once you have them kind of plant those back feet where you want them, you train them to leave them there. Because I know in the beginning, you know, once you get that, then you can adjust the front. Sometimes you have them step out, step to the side, but you want those back feet planted, correct?
To stay there, exactly right. And then the part of the process, so day 1 through 3 of the training process, we might just work on those 2 little things we worked on here, which is to back up and then to walk forward and stop when I ask the horse to stop. After we've established that, then we can move on to having the back feet stay in place and moving the front feet around, and that takes a little longer. It's a strange concept for that horse to get comfortable with that, but essentially we are then separating the back legs from the front legs and getting the horse taught to allow us to position those front feet wherever we want. So I'll work on that for just a second.
Okay.
And I'm first gonna ask the horse to stop again, just like I did the first time, okay, but then I'll go over a little bit of that foot placement with the front feet as well. So here again, little contact on the back of her head, and ask her to walk forward. She might not want to come at first, so I'm just going to be patient with her. Whoa. There, I'll just make sure I've got the contact. See how I'm giving her a couple little nudges with my halter? That's just me saying, stay put. Now I'm just going to set a real clear barrier. I'm going to step over here where I want her to step, take a little hold of her head. She came off that foot, but I'm not going to make a big deal of it. She moved the feet like that, I give her a release. And so really, whoops, she then brought the foot up, back up. So this part where we're getting that horse used to keeping its back feet in place and moving the front feet around just takes a lot of repetition. You want that horse to get comfortable standing in that position and balancing itself. So there, she's moved her feet over a little bit. Now I'm just going to give her these little bumps and make sure she's staying put, walk around her a little bit, make sure she stays put, and I'm going to tell her, good girl. So Cameron, if you would be up for it, I'd have you take a hold of her and I can kind of walk you through some of this.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So what you'll notice where I have my lead, I'm going to have you hold it in the same spot, and then every handler might feel a little bit differently about it. What works well for me is to find a place on that lead and stay put there.
Okay.
Rather than, if you were to correct your horse or something, you want to go with your horse. You don't want to have that lead sliding through your hand. Folks that do showmanship really don't like this concept, but because they're afraid, that horse could drag you around. The fact is, we're not going to do anything so aggressive that's going to have that horse pulling us around. Right. So we're really safe there. And also, I want the horse to know, hey, we're going with him wherever he goes, and we just have to.
Well, and for people watching, I mean, all I have to do is let that go, and it unravels. So it's not like I have this so tightly wrapped around my hand but it is there. If I want it to stay locked, I just close my hand.
Exactly. Very good. So think about this. You'll get in front of her, Cameron. You'll have one line from your shoulder all the way to her chin. So that hand's up a little bit, and let's start by establishing that contact behind her head. So just think about that. You're kind of getting a hold of that halt. There you go. That's great. You're getting a hold of the halter from behind her ears, and you can just keep doing that with your hand. You're saying to her right there, hey, this is where I want your head to be positioned.
I'm not really pulling. It's kind of like a gentle pulse, really.
That's right. So you stay right here, Cameron, and what I'm going to have you do is pretend you're holding a whip. So your hand's up here by your shoulder, even back a little further. Put some space in between your legs so one leg is ahead of the other. That's good. So what I'm going to have you do is just kind of raise both hands straight up and walk towards her, and she should walk back. Go ahead with both hands. Give her a little bump with your lead. Little bump, good, and let your hands down. Good. That's a good start. So from here, let's have her walk forward again. I want you to watch that black foot, and when it lands, you'll raise your hands again. Good. Now, that's a really nice position right there. And come around to her side and pet her. So I think the thing to look at, this horse has had a little bit of training, so she knows to watch you, but this is the concept we're trying to establish from the beginning, is to have the horse look to the handler to get the commands.
Right.
And then that then gives the horse the attentive look. And also the intensity. So some people think that the reason a horse gets real intense is because you have to be hard on it. The horses that I show, that's not the case. They're intense because they're watching very carefully to see what the command is.
Yeah, they're waiting for the next thing.
That's right.
And that's something you train. Like you train them to keep that focus.
Exactly. We're training them to really concentrate, really focus on us, and that our timing is going to be real crisp and real precise. And it's that timing that allows one to really have that horse with them. And so that is the kind of the short version of it.
All right, I'm going to try it one more time.
Yeah.
Okay, so try.
Let's
coach me
practice
through
the
this.
backup first. So again,
Okay.
one line from your shoulder all the way to her chin. Keep the contact, and 1 foot back further than the other. So if you're standing like this with your feet right next to each other, you can't really pivot your body back and forth. And a horse, when it's responding to your hand going up, but it's also yielding away from your body. So this allows you to shift your weight onto your front foot. So Cameron, one thing that I want you to do here is with your right hand, you're pretending there's a whip in that hand. That's not going to go towards her. That's going to go straight up. That's her cue. So back by your ear even with it.
Oh, so even
Good.
more back. Okay.
Yep, so start by just raising that hand. Start by there, walk into her, and take it down. Really
So
good.
does
Now
this
go-
hand raise as well?
It can.
Okay.
It's not going way up, but come around to her side. We're going to do that one more time. So what I want, this is the process. So Cameron's applied a cue. The horse has responded. The horse gets a reward. If you apply the cue and the horse doesn't back up or respond, it gets a correction. You're saying, this is what I'm asking you to do. It responds. It then gets the reward. The reward is a really important part of training a halter horse to have a soft eye and to like its job. You know, it needs to be fair.
And I understand an award for a horse, a reward, being rest. That they get a rest from having to have that attention.
Yes.
They get a rest from having to hold whatever frame you're asking them to be in.
That's
So
a good point.
Rest
It's
is reward.
Either work or break, you know? So it's kind of like a break from the work. The reward is the time we're just hanging out with it. We're not asking them to do anything.
And something I think you'll notice, and you made a point of happy horses show really well, or that ability to relax. They'll start to chew a little bit, and that's when that's when they're like, they kind of take that breath, they relax a little bit.
And
So-
don't you think about the psychology of a judge. A horse that looks like it's happy to be there is so much more pleasant than a horse that looks scared or annoyed, intimidated. That's harder to judge, and it's not as beautiful. So if we can have a horse do things attentively, but also look like it's trying to please and likes what it's doing, it's a lot easier to write higher on the judge's card.
Well, and I think it's great that when I'm in front of her, she's so attentive and watching, but then right now she's almost sitting here falling asleep.
She thinks it's great.
Yeah.
She likes people. She likes this time.
Yeah.
Let's get in front of her again,
Yeah, we'll do it
Cameron.
one more
We're going to
time.
we're going to ask her to back again. How's your posture? That's really good. Now, before you ask her anything, we might have to give her a little correction. Here's what that correction looks like. It just is a pretty crisp little bump over to the side. Okay, so that's right. So if you raise your hand, don't do it quite yet, but you're going to raise your right hand, and that means to her it's time to back up. If she backs up, there's no bump. If she doesn't back up, it's a bump, get out of the way, okay? Raise your hand first, bump. Good, and let it down. And pick a little half moon around her and come to her side. The reason you wouldn't walk straight into her is because really we're teaching her to yield
move.
away from the pressure. If
Right.
you then walk into her to praise her,
She's gonna back away.
it's contradictory, right?
Right.
So when you do go give her that praise, it's good to make a little half moon and really try to keep things separate, try to keep things clear.
Right. I drop my eyes a little bit just to be a little less
Perfect.
threatening.
So this is a good lesson in the basics. So for instance, I might work at this same tempo, working on these same things with this kind of relaxed feel for a few weeks, and I want that horse to just to like doing this with me. And that's almost one of the first things we're trying to teach it is to have, hey, this is fun. This is a nice time. We don't want that horse to think, oh no,
Like every time it gets brought out of the stall,
I gotta go
it's-
do that again. I
Right.
don't like it. So if you can instill like some appreciation for it in your horse initially, it makes the rest of the process considerably easier.
Well, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, those initial training sessions, they're relatively brief, yeah? I mean,
Yes.
you're working with the horse for just a couple minutes. This isn't something that,
Maybe 10.
yeah, that
And
you're not doing it for an hour with a horse.
For sure. And I think it's important. What I try to do almost all the time when I'm schooling horses to end on a positive note where that horse did something well that I can reward it for. I don't want to end when we're not seeing eye to eye. So, especially at the beginning stages, it's important to you're trying to communicate something to your horse, and that's the most important part of it. Whether you're training a halter horse or whether you're training a riding horse, the good horse trainers are able to really clearly communicate with their horse, and so that horse has no confusion. And it's the same with halter as it is for riding.
So do you maybe want to stand her up once?
Sure.
Yeah, I know she's not.
She's doing good, and so you'll see that in the stand-up, you know, it can be beautiful without her looking extremely intense or scared. So she's looking attentive. I'm going to walk her up here. Oh. And that's a really nice pose, right? Easy to
Yeah.
judge.
She's got the eyes, the ears, the nostrils.
Good girl.
So any last tips you would say for somebody who's maybe gonna start trying to apply some of this stuff with their horse at home or wherever they might be? Any last tips on how to implement this?
One thing I want to mention is that I think a lot of this process can actually be really beneficial to horses that are going to later do performance. And so I've heard it said over the years that, oh, if a horse does halter as a youngster, it doesn't help it for performance. But actually these concepts that we're talking about are really good pressure and release concepts that will also be in play when they're doing performance. Also, halter for a young horse helps that horse get used to being washed and tied and go to some of the shows. And I've had some friends who are performance trainers tell me that they actually really like to get the horses in that have had a little show experience as youngsters. So I'd like to curb the idea that halter can be contradictory to performance. It's not the case. The two actually can be quite a lot alike.
Yeah, and I know of several trainers, trainers who do performance and halter, and they'll have a horse that competes in halter that morning and then goes in and competes in performance later and has a really great show. And so I think that's to your point of starting to break this myth, training wise, but also just the versatility, I think, of the Arabian horse. It's really cool to know that you have these horses that can go from one thing to another. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, thank you for taking the time to learn about it.
thank you so much for doing this. I definitely learned a thing or two, and hopefully our viewers did too. So.
Yeah, great.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.